The morning sun had just begun to rise over the sleepy fishing village of San Isidro, its light glimmering across the rippling blue waters like shards of gold. Seagulls circled above the boats returning from the night's catch, their cries blending with the soft crash of waves against the shore. It was the kind of place where people knew each other by name, where laughter and struggle lived side by side, and where dreams often got left behind with the tide. But for 16-year-old Miguel Alonso, every sunrise carried a song. He sat on the bamboo steps outside their small nipa hut, a cracked guitar resting on his lap, the same one his father had once played under the same golden light. Its strings were worn thin, its body chipped from years of use, but to Miguel it was sacred. His father used to say, "Son, a good heart will make even broken strings sing." Miguel's fingers strummed softly, coaxing out the tune of "Love Me Tender." His voice rose with the morning breeze, deep, mellow, with that soulful tremor that somehow sounded both like Elvis Presley and uniquely his own. The notes floated through the village, weaving through coconut trees and across the market stalls below. A few neighbors paused their chores to listen. "Ah, that boy again." One old fisherman chuckled, shaking his head, "Sounds just like the king himself." Another woman smiled, laying out fish to dry. "He's got his father's voice, may he rest in peace." Inside the hut, Maria, Miguel's mother, listened quietly as she packed small baskets of dried fish. Her hands were rough and calloused from years of work, but her eyes softened at the sound of her son's singing. That voice, that was what kept her going when the world felt heavy. When the last note faded, Miguel turned and grinned. "Ma, what do you think? Did it sound like Elvis this time?" Maria laughed softly. "You always sound like Elvis, Anak, but maybe even better." Miguel blushed. "Better than Elvis? Ma, that's impossible." She winked. "Nothing's impossible if you sing with love." He strummed another chord, smiling. He'd been told that line 1,000 times. By her, and before that by his father Thomas. Thomas had been a local legend of sorts, a street musician who could make a whole market stop with his rendition of "Suspicious Minds." He never had fame or riches, but he carried music in his heart, and he'd passed that same fire to his son. But 2 years ago, a storm took him, swept his fishing boat out before dawn, and he never came back. Since then, the music had become Miguel's way of keeping him close. He played every morning before heading to the market to help his mother sell dried fish. Sometimes when the sales were slow, he'd hum to pass the time, and customers would gather drawn by that gentle, velvet tone. "Sing us one more, Hijo," the regulars would say. Miguel would grin, blush, and start another Elvis tune, his voice echoing through the stalls. Lisa, his best friend since childhood, often joined him. She was the kind of girl who laughed easily and believed in everything, even dreams that seemed impossible. She'd clap along, teasing, "One day you'll be on TV, Miguel, and when you are, don't forget your #1 fan." Miguel would roll his eyes, half joking, half wishing, "Sure, sure, maybe when Elvis himself comes back to earth to sing with me." But deep down her words planted something, a spark. That night, after the market quieted and the stars came out, Miguel sat by the sea, guitar in hand. The waves whispered secrets to the shore, and the moonlight danced on the water. He closed his eyes, remembering the last words his father had said to him before that fateful storm. "Keep singing, my boy. When you sing, the world listens, even if you can't see them." The memory made his throat tighten. He missed him. Every note he sang felt like sending a message to the sky. He began to play again, this time softly, "Can't Help Falling in Love." His voice carried over the sea, filling the night with something pure and aching. As he sang, a small group of children from the village gathered nearby, sitting cross-legged in the sand. They didn't make a sound, just listened, mesmerized. Even the fishermen resting by their boats turned their heads. When he finished, there was silence. That kind of silence that feels holy, like everyone's heart had stopped for a moment. Then a little boy clapped and shouted, "Kuya Miguel! Sing again!" Miguel laughed, a little embarrassed. "That's enough for tonight, little one. Your mothers will scold me if you don't go home." The children giggled and ran off, but one old fisherman lingered. He placed a hand on Miguel's shoulder. "You have a gift, son. Don't let it stay here by the shore. Let the world hear it." The words echoed in Miguel's mind long after the man walked away. Later that night, as he helped his mother close their small window for the evening, he saw her pause, staring at a framed photograph of Thomas holding that same old guitar. Her eyes were glistening. "Ma," Miguel said softly, "do you think Dad ever thought of going on TV, like those talent shows?" She smiled wistfully. "He dreamed of it once, but life had had other plans." She turned to him, her expression tender but serious. "If you ever get a chance, Miguel, don't be afraid. Your father would want you to try." He nodded, feeling something stir in his chest, a longing that scared him and thrilled him all at once. That night, he lay awake listening to the sound of crickets outside and the ocean waves in the distance. His guitar rested beside him. His hands itched to play again, but his thoughts were louder than the music. Could he really do it? Could a poor boy from a fishing village, with no fancy clothes, no proper stage, ever stand where stars like Elvis once stood? As the moonlight poured through the window, Miguel whispered to the night, as if his father could still hear him, "Someday, Papa, I'll sing for the world. And I'll make them feel what you made me feel." The ocean answered in its quiet way, waves crashing against the rocks like applause. And though he didn't know it yet, that promise, made in a small hut by the sea, would one day reach a stage so bright even Simon Cowell would be left speechless. The next few weeks passed in the steady rhythm of ordinary days. Dawn at the market, laughter with neighbors, evenings by the sea. Yet for Miguel, something inside had begun to change. The old fisherman's words, "Don't let it stay here by the shore. Let the world hear it," echoed in his heart like a song he couldn't forget. It started one humid afternoon when the village plaza filled with color and noise. Paper lanterns swung from poles and the air smelled of roasted corn and sweet banana cue. It was the San Isidro Festival, the biggest event of the year. The small stage at the center of the plaza was where local singers and dancers performed, hoping to win a small cash prize, or at least a bit of applause. Miguel and Lisa sat on a wooden bench near the back, watching as children in bright costumes danced to upbeat pop songs. The crowd cheered, the laughter was loud, but Miguel seemed lost in thought. His guitar rested on his lap but his hands didn't move. Lisa nudged him. "Why aren't you up there?" He looked down. "Me, no way, I'm not ready." She crossed her arms. "You say that every year, you sing better than all of them combined, Miguel." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but singing here and singing up there." He nodded toward the stage, where a boy about his age was performing nervously. "That's different. Up there, people watch, they judge." Lisa sighed dramatically. "You're impossible. Do you even know there's an open audition coming to Cebu next month? Asia's Got Talent, the real one, with Simon Cowell." Miguel's head jerked up. "What? I saw it on Facebook!" "People are lining up to audition. They say the winner could go international. Can you imagine that?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Liza, those are for people with real training, fancy microphones. Managers, not for kids like me who sell dried fish." Lisa leaned closer, her eyes shining. "Elvis didn't start in a fancy place either. He was just a boy who loved music, just like you." Her words hit him harder than he expected. That night, as they walked home from the festival, the laughter of the crowd fading behind them, Miguel couldn't shake the thought. He pictured himself on that massive stage, the blinding lights, the huge audience, the judges' faces watching him. The idea both thrilled and terrified him. When they reached the small road leading to their homes, Lisa stopped and looked at him seriously. "You should go, Miguel. Your father would want you to." He didn't answer. He just stared at the sky, where the stars burned like scattered embers. The next morning, he found himself sitting in front of his father's old photo again. It was a faded picture. Thomas smiling wide, guitar slung across his shoulder, his eyes full of life. Miguel traced the edges of the frame gently. "Papa," he whispered, "what would you do?" The answer came not in words, but in memory. That night when his father stood singing in the rain at the market, because someone's little girl had been crying. His father didn't care that he was drenched, or that no one paid him. He sang until the child laughed again. "Music isn't about being seen, son. It's about making someone feel something." Miguel took a deep breath. That was it. Maybe he wasn't chasing fame. Maybe he just wanted to make people feel what his father made him feel. He stood, heart pounding, and went to find his mother. She was at the back of the hut, washing clothes in a basin of cold water. Her back ached but she didn't complain. "She never did, Ma." He began hesitating. "Do you think I could audition for Asia's Got Talent?" She froze, hands still in the soapy water. Slowly, she turned to look at him. "That's in Cebu City, isn't it?" He nodded. "Next month." Lisa said they're letting walk-ins join. Her face softened with pride, then clouded with worry. "Anak, that's a long trip, the boat ticket, the food, the clothes." She sighed, shaking her head. "We barely earn enough for the week." Miguel looked down, guilt filling his chest. "I know. I thought maybe." Before he could finish, she reached out and touched his cheek, her hand still wet. "You want to try? I can see it in your eyes. You remind me of your father when he was young." He swallowed hard. "So is that a yes?" She smiled sadly. We'll find a way." The days that followed were a blur of saving and sacrifice. Miguel worked extra hours at the market, sometimes skipping lunch so they could set aside a few pesos. Lisa helped too. She sold old notebooks and snacks, insisting, "If you get famous, I'm your manager." When Miguel's guitar string finally snapped from overuse, Lisa's uncle, a retired carpenter, helped him fix it with a spare wire. "It won't sound perfect," the man said, tightening the knot, "but sometimes imperfections make the music more real." Every night, Miguel practiced. He sang softly by the sea, the waves his only audience. Sometimes he imagined the lights, the crowd, the judges, and sometimes he imagined just his father watching from the dark, smiling that same proud smile. Then one evening, while practicing, can't help falling in love. he saw a small crowd forming behind him. It was the same villagers, fishermen, vendors, kids, listening again, swaying to the melody. When he finished, an elderly woman stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. "You sing with your heart, Hijo," she said. "If you go to that city, sing like you're singing for all of us." Miguel's throat tightened. "I will." Finally, the day came. His mother packed his clothes, just 2 shirts, a pair of jeans, and the old guitar wrapped in cloth. She placed a small envelope of money in his hand. "It's not much," she said softly, "but it's enough for the ticket and food. Promise me one thing, don't sing to impress, sing to express." Miguel hugged her tightly. "I promise, Ma." Liza met him at the dock, waving excitedly with a small handmade banner that read "O Mudigul, make el Piro." They laughed, but when the boat horn sounded, both of them fell silent. "Don't forget us when you're on TV, she teased, though her voice wavered. He smiled, eyes glistening. "Never." As the boat pulled away, Miguel watched the village grow smaller behind him. The huts, the shore, his mother standing by the water waving a handkerchief. The sea stretched endlessly ahead, just like the dream he was chasing. The wind brushed his face, carrying the faint echo of a song, his father's voice, or maybe his own heart, whispering, "Don't be afraid, my son. The world needs to hear your song." And with that, Miguel closed his eyes, held his guitar tight, and whispered a silent promise to the horizon. "I'll make you proud, Papa. No matter how far I go, I'll carry our music with me." The city lights awaited him in the distance, bright and blinding. But in Miguel's heart it wasn't fame he was chasing, it was a memory, a love, and a legacy too big for his small world to contain. The morning sun had barely risen when the bus from the Cebu port rumbled into the city. For Miguel, who had never been beyond the fishing villages of his province, everything felt impossibly large. The skyscrapers that pierced the clouds, the cars that roared past, the endless sea of people. He clutched his old guitar close to his chest like a lifeline. The building ahead loomed like a dream. Asia's Got Talent auditions. 200, a banner stretched across the entrance, and a long line of hopefuls wound around the block. Some carried guitars and keyboards, others wore sequined costumes or carried juggling props. The energy buzzed with nervous laughter, excitement, and whispered prayers. Miguel took his place at the end of the line, heart thudding. His clothes were simple, a white shirt, faded jeans and sandals, but his mother had pressed them carefully, every wrinkle smoothed out, every button fastened. He thought of her voice that morning on the dock, "Don't sing to impress, sing to express." The line crept forward for hours. Miguel listened to people around him, contestants from Manila, Singapore, even Thailand, all talking about music schools and vocal coaches. He had none of those, only his father's words and his mother's love. By the time he reached the registration desk, the sun had already dipped behind the high buildings. A woman with a clipboard smiled at him. "Miguel Alonso," he said nervously. "Age
16. Talent.
He smiled faintly, singing Elvis Presley songs. She looked up, intrigued.
Elvis, ha.
She handed him a number sticker. Fen 312, and motioned him toward the waiting area. Backstage the world was a blur of noise and nerves. Contestants paced, stretched, whispered. Laskel sat quietly on a folding chair, staring at his calloused fingers. Lisa's handmade bracelet, a simple blue thread, was tied around his wrist. A stagehand walked by, calling numbers. "Number 310, number 3 love, number 312, you're next." Miguel's stomach tightened, his legs felt heavy, but something deeper pushed him forward. As he stepped toward the curtain, he heard the muffled hum of the crowd beyond. Hundreds of people waiting, watching. The light spilling from the stage was blinding. The announcer's voice echoed, "Next up from Cebu, Philippines, 16-year-old Miguel Alonso, who says he's inspired by the king of rock, roll himself, Elvis Presley." A polite cheer rippled through the audience. Miguel walked onto the stage, squinting at the lights. His guitar hung from a worn strap, the same one his father had used years ago. Before him sat the panel, 4 judges, including Simon Cowell himself. Sitting in the center with his usual unreadable expression, Miguel's throat went dry. "Hello there," Simon said. "What's your name, young man?" "Miguel, sir, from Cebu, Philippines." "And what are you going to sing for us today?" Miguel took a deep breath. "Can't Help Falling in Love, by Elvis Presley." Simon raised an eyebrow, a hint of curiosity and maybe skepticism flickering across his face. "A brave choice, let's hear it." Miguel's fingers trembled slightly as he strummed the first chord. The sound was raw but rich, echoing softly through the theater. Then he began to sing, "Wise men say only fools rush in." The moment his voice touched the air, something changed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forced, it was pure, deep, warm and hauntingly familiar. The tone carried the soul of Elvis, yet there was something more, something heartbreakingly sincere. The audience fell silent almost instantly. Miguel closed his eyes, letting the music take over. The lights, the judges, the fear, they all disappeared. In his mind he was back by the sea, singing under the stars with his father's spirit listening. But I can't help falling in love with you. His voice cracked slightly on the last word, but it wasn't weakness, it was emotion. Real, trembling emotion. In the front row a woman clasped her hands over her mouth. One of the judges leaned forward, eyes wide. Even Simon, who had started the performance with his arms folded, slowly leaned closer, his expression softening. The final verse came out like a prayer. Take my hand, take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in love with you. The last note hung in the air, fragile as glass. For a heartbeat no one moved. Then, one by one, the audience rose to their feet. The applause began softly, then swelled like a wave crashing over the theater. Miguel blinked, stunned. His heart hammered in his chest. He'd done it, not perfectly, but honestly. When he looked up at the judges, he froze. Simon Cowell wasn't speaking. He wasn't smiling or frowning. He just sat there, eyes glistening, lips pressed tight, as if words had deserted him. The host stepped forward, trying to break the tension. Well, Simon, you're usually quick to speak your mind. Simon finally exhaled, almost shaking his head in disbelief. He stood up slowly. The theater hushed again. Then, in a quiet, uncharacteristic voice, he said, "That was one of the most beautiful performances I've heard in years." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Simon's voice trembled slightly as he continued. "You didn't just sing Elvis, you felt him, and you made us feel him too. That takes heart, and that's something you can't teach." Miguel swallowed hard, his vision blurring with tears. Another judge, a famous pop star, dabbed her eyes and said, "You've reminded us why music matters. It's not about fame or perfection, it's about connection." The golden buzzer glimmered before them. The audience began to chant, "Hit it! Hit it! Hit it!" Simon glanced at his fellow judges, then looked back at Miguel, and smiled faintly. "Sometimes you don't need to say anything at all." He reached forward and pressed the golden buzzer. In an instant, confetti rained from the ceiling. The crowd roared as Miguel covered his face in disbelief. His guitar slipped from his shoulder, but he didn't care. He had never seen so much light, so much color. Backstage crew members rushed out, hugging him, cheering. The host shouted over the noise, "Ladies and gentlemen, Miguel Alonso from the Philippines, heading straight to the semifinals." Miguel stood there, trembling under the golden rain. Somewhere deep inside, he whispered, "Papa, did you hear that?" And though he couldn't see it, in that vast audience, thousands of people felt what he did. The presence of something pure, something bigger than music. Later that night, alone in his small dressing room, Miguel sat staring at his reflection. The golden confetti still clung to his hair. His guitar, the same cracked, patched up one from home, leaned against the wall. He whispered to himself, "I didn't just sing, Papa. I told our story." Tears filled his eyes, but this time, they weren't of sadness. They were the kind that fall when a dream finally stops being a dream, and becomes real. The golden confetti had long been swept away, but the moment still shimmered in Miguel's mind like it had just happened. Even hours later, backstage in the quiet aftermath, he could still feel the echo of the applause reverberating through his chest, louder than any sound he had ever known. He sat on a small wooden bench near the dressing rooms, clutching his guitar with both hands. The corridor was filled with muffled voices, crew members packing up, producers talking through headsets, other contestants congratulating each other. Yet for Miguel, the world had gone strangely still. He ran his thumb over the rough edge of the guitar, the one his father had once sanded smooth. His mind replayed every second, stepping into that blinding light, hearing his name, seeing Simon Cowell stand without a word, and then that golden buzzer falling like rain from heaven. He closed his eyes, whispering a quiet prayer, "Thank you, Papa. Thank you, Ma. Thank you, God." Suddenly, the door creaked open, and one of the show's assistants peeked in. "Miguel, the judges want to see you for a moment." His eyes widened. "Now," she smiled. "Wes, Simon asked for you personally." Miguel's heart began to race as he followed her down the hallway. His sandals squeaked slightly on the polished floor, and each step felt heavier than the last. He'd faced thousands of eyes on stage earlier, but this, walking back into the judge's room, somehow felt harder. When the assistant opened the door, he froze. The 4 judges were sitting casually now, the studio lights dimmed, the cameras off. Simon Cowell was leaning forward in his chair, elbows on his knees, a cup of coffee in hand. The other judges were smiling warmly. "Miguel," Simon said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Come in, son. Sit down." Miguel bowed his head slightly, polite, nervous. "Thank you, sir." Simon studied him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Do you know how rare it is for me to have nothing to say after a performance?" Miguel looked down. I saw your face, sir. I thought maybe I made you speechless in a bad way." That made everyone laugh softly, including Simon. "No, not in a bad way, in the best way." He set his coffee aside and leaned closer. "When you sang, it wasn't just talent, it was truth. There's something about honesty that hits harder than perfection." The pop star judge nodded. "You made us remember what music used to feel like. Before fame, before money, before the noise. Just heart." Miguel blinked back tears, unsure what to say. "Thank you, Mom. My father, he taught me that music should make people feel something. He used to sing Elvis too. Simon's expression softened instantly. Your father must be proud. I lost mine when I was young, too. That confession surprised Miguel. He'd never imagined this global icon, this unshakable man, would share something so personal. Simon continued, voice lower now. When I watched you sing, I saw that same ache. That love for someone who's not here anymore. That's why I couldn't speak. Because for a few minutes, it wasn't a show, it was real. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The room was silent except for the hum of studio lights. Then Miguel whispered, I sang it for him. For my father. I wanted him to hear me, wherever he is. Simon nodded slowly. He did. Those two words hit Miguel like a wave. His throat tightened and his eyes filled again, but he tried to hide it, ducking his head. Don't, Simon said softly. Don't hide that. Real artists don't. The other judges smiled, and one of them reached across to pat Miguel's shoulder. You've touched more hearts than you'll ever know, Miguel. You didn't just move Simon. You moved all of us. When Miguel left the judge's room, he stepped out into the empty corridor again, but something inside him had changed. He wasn't just the poor boy from Cebu anymore. He wasn't just Thomas's son. He was someone who had made the world feel what he felt, and that realization filled him with both joy and humility. As he walked toward the exit, he spotted a small group of crew members gathered around a television, replaying his performance. Even on the little screen, the magic still lived. His trembling hands, the crack in his voice, Simon's stunned silence. A woman nearby wiped her eyes. It's been years since I cried at a performance, she said softly. That boy's voice, it feels like home. Miguel stopped in his track, frozen. That one word, home, stirred something deep in him. That's what he wanted people to feel. That warmth, that connection. He stepped outside into the night air. The city was alive with lights, taxis honking, neon signs flickering, laughter spilling from nearby cafes. But above all that noise, Miguel heard only the echo of his song. He walked to a quiet corner behind the theater, where the sound of the city dimmed. There, he sat on a crate and pulled out his guitar. The strings still shimmered faintly with golden confetti dust. He began to hum softly, not for the cameras, not for the judges, just for himself. Wise men say only fools rush in. A security guard passing by stopped, listening. Soon another person joined, standing silently at a distance. The melody drifted through the cool air, soft and sincere. It wasn't a performance anymore, it was a prayer. When the last note faded, the small group that had gathered clapped quietly. Miguel smiled shyly and bowed. Thank you, he said almost in a whisper. One woman stepped forward, the same assistant who had guided him earlier. Her eyes were red from crying. You know, she said, Simon's seen thousands of singers, but I've never seen him like that before. You reminded him and all of us why we love music. Miguel felt a lump rise in his throat. I just sang what I felt. That's why it worked, she said. Later that night, in his small hotel room, Miguel sat by the window overlooking the sleeping city. The streets glowed like a river of fireflies. He could see his reflection in the glass, tired, still in his plain white shirt, the blue bracelet around his wrist. He picked up his phone and dialed home. There was a rustle on the other end, then his mother's familiar, shaky voice. Miguel, Anak, we saw you on TV! Everyone in the village watched. They were cheering. Oh, Hijo, you were amazing! He laughed softly, tears streaming down his cheeks. You saw? Yes! Lisa ran to every house shouting your name! Even the mayor came to watch. She paused, her voice breaking. Your father would be so proud, Miguel. You sang like he used to, with love. Miguel couldn't answer. He just let the tears fall, silently. After they said goodnight, he sat there for a long time, staring at the city lights. For the first time, he realized something profound: the applause, the buzzer, the praise. None of it mattered as much as that call from home. Because at the heart of it all, what he wanted wasn't fame, it was connection. To make people feel, to remind them, and himself, that love never really leaves, it just changes its song. He lifted his guitar once more, whispering to the stars, "Good night, Papa. I think you heard me tonight." And somewhere, in the quiet between the city's noise and the sea's memory, it felt like the wind carried a familiar hum back to him. A soft, distant echo of "Love Me Tender." The morning sun over Cebu was golden, tender and kind, the kind of light that felt like a blessing. In the small fishing village of San Isidro, life went on as usual. Fishermen pushed their bancas into the tide, children chased each other through the sandy streets, and vendors called out their daily offers. But in one modest nipa house at the edge of the shore, a mother sat before an old box-shaped television, tears streaming down her face. The image on the screen was blurry, but she didn't need clarity. She knew that voice anywhere. It was her son, Miguel. She whispered, clutching a faded photograph of him and her late husband. "Anak, your father would be so proud." The television replayed Miguel's performance from Asia's Got Talent. The moment Simon Cowell stood speechless had gone viral. Millions across the world watched the shy Filipino teen in his worn denim jacket and borrowed guitar transform into a vessel of pure soul. The comments online called him, the spirit of Elvis, the boy who made Simon cry, and the voice that crossed oceans. But in his hometown, he was still just Miguel from the market, the boy who used to sing by the pier with a plastic bucket for tips. Weeks later, Miguel returned home. There was no limousine, no bodyguards, only a public jeepney and a backpack that carried his old guitar and a few gifts. When the villagers saw him walking down the dirt road, they rushed out of their homes like a wave. Children cheered his name. Old men clapped him on the back, women wiped away tears.
Miguel, you made us proud, Hijo!
Miguel, my daughter watches you every night. He smiled, overwhelmed, bowing his head in gratitude. He said again and again, his voice trembling with humility, "Thank you for believing in me." But one person stood back, his mother Maria, who could barely move, her hands over her mouth as she saw her son approach. For years she had carried the weight of survival, selling dried fish, scrubbing laundry, and whispering prayers into the wind for Miguel's safety. Now as he knelt before her and took her hand, it all broke free. "I told you, Mama," he whispered, his forehead pressed to her hand. "Someday, I'd make you proud." Maria's tears spilled freely. "You already did, my son. The day you chose kindness, the day you sang from your heart, that was enough." That evening, the whole village gathered at the small chapel near the shore. It wasn't a concert, not in the fancy sense. The stage was made of bamboo, strung with yellow light bulbs and coconut leaves. But for the people of San Isidro, it was their grandest night yet. Miguel stood before them, his guitar in hand, the same one he had borrowed for his audition. He strummed gently, the sea breeze whispering through the palm trees as if nature itself leaned in to listen. "I wanted to sing one more time," he said softly into the microphone. "Not for fame, not for TV, but for home. For all of you who taught me what love and hope sound like." He began to sing "Love Me Tender." His voice carried the same warmth that had stunned the judges, but now it felt even more powerful, because it was surrounded by love. Mothers held their children close, fathers tapped their feet, and as Miguel's voice floated into the night, the stars themselves seemed to shimmer in rhythm. When the last note faded, silence lingered, the kind that lives only between hearts too full to speak. Then, a wave of applause erupted. Echoing, Daria couldn't stop crying. Lisa, standing near the front, was sobbing too, though she was smiling wider than ever. "You did it, Miguel," she whispered. "You really did." Days passed and Miguel's story spread far beyond what he imagined. Invitations poured in, TV shows, charity concerts, even offers from recording labels abroad. But Miguel's first decision shocked everyone. He used the prize money and donations from his fans not to buy a house or new clothes, but to rebuild the old community music school that had closed when he was a boy. "It was my father's dream," Miguel explained at the groundbreaking ceremony, holding a shovel beside a group of local kids. "He always said music should belong to everyone, not just those who can afford it. So this school, this is for the next kids who have songs in their hearts but nowhere to sing them." The villagers cheered, some crying openly. Local officials offered to help. Volunteers showed up, carpenters, teachers, even teenagers who once thought dreams like Miguel's were impossible. They named it, the Heartbeat School of Music. Months later, when the doors opened, Miguel stood before a classroom filled with eager young faces holding second-hand instruments. He taught them Elvis, of course, but also songs from their own hearts. "Remember," he told them, smiling, "you don't need to sound perfect, you just need to sing with truth. Because real music doesn't come from here." He tapped his throat. "Comes from here." He placed his hand over his chest. That evening, as he sat by the beach with his mother and Lisa, watching the orange sunset dip into the horizon, Miguel felt something deep and quiet stir inside him. He had once thought the stage was where dreams ended, where applause meant victory. But now he understood it was only the beginning. The true gift of his voice wasn't fame or fortune. It was connection. It was how a melody could cross oceans, soften hearts, and remind people of their shared humanity. "Funny, isn't it?" he said, smiling as he looked at the waves. "I sang Elvis to the world, but I think it's the world that sang back to me." And Lisa nudged him playfully. And made Simon Cowell speechless. They all laughed, the sound mingling with the sea breeze. Maria placed her arm around her son, whispering, "Your father must be singing along right now." Miguel closed his eyes, listening to the gentle hush of the waves. For a moment he imagined hearing his father's voice again, soft, proud and full of love. "Son, music isn't just sound, it's a heartbeat people can feel." He smiled. The boy who once sang for coins by the pier had become the man who gave others a reason to believe in their own music. And somewhere between the tide and the stars, it felt like the world was still listening. Final message: true greatness isn't measured by how loud the world applauds you, but by how deeply your song touches a heart.